All right, guys, welcome back for another fantastic edition here of Traders Talk, our live weekly workshop hosted not just now in our Cybergroup trading room, but streaming across YouTube and Facebook alike, guys. Welcome on aboard. My name is Josh Levitan. I'm the senior instructor here at Cyber Trading University. Let's just begin with a quick sound check. Just make sure everyone here can hear me loud and clear. There we go. Chuck, Dennis, Mark, Donnie, Cliff, Neil, Anthony, Kurt. You guys are coming in way too fast. All of our students here in our Cybergroup trading room. Great to see everybody. And again, not just for those in the trading room, but just for today streaming across social media, Facebook and YouTube alike, guys. Keep in mind that for all of us here in our trading room, at least, and especially our newest members, our newly enrolled students and trial members alike, this trading room and, essentially the call outs that we make move very, very fast, right? And we always like to start with this because we market and we advertise the cyber room exactly as that, a live professional trading room. We don't really have the chance to offer as much education in this trading room given how fast everything moves. We separate our training, our education from our trading. So, typically during a more idle time in the market, of course, here every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we do Traders Talk. So, this gives us a much greater ability to kind of break down the who, what, when, where, why, and how of some of these trades that we've been following. All right, guys. So, I'd like to begin really just with a couple of stocks that we called out from the open. Not only that, but of course, later on, we'll have a chance to go through a few email questions that students had already sent in and trades as well. So, let's begin with what's on the board here. What's on the screen, I should rather say. The INO trade, or not INO, my goodness, the WATT trade, I should say. WATT. I need more coffee. So, of course, Watt was the big mover early in the pre-market. 7 a.m. the thing broke out from 150, ran all the way up to 3. Well, here's the thing. I have a lot of new members that join the Cybergroup trading room here, and they look at a move like Watt early in the pre-market, and they say, well, the move's already made. There's nothing left to gain on this trade. Now, for a lot of these small cap stocks, and a lot of these stocks otherwise, they're just up enormous percentages like Watt was this morning. Well, at 9:30, when the market opens up, we're expecting a pullback. We're expecting sell-off here. Very quickly, might I say, this stock from yesterday, NBY, did literally just that. Let's see if I have the chance to load up the chart. There we go. NBY, look at this. This thing was up big in pre-market. It popped at the open, literally at 9:30. It did pop, but the pullback came after, right? So I understand that point of view from new students and new members that join us because they look at a stock like NBY and it tanks, and unless if you could short it, you're not gonna watch this stock, because if you tend to watch a stock that you can't trade, not only are you not making money, but you're losing the ability to follow trades that can gain you way more potentially than this one would even. So, Watt at 9:30 when the market opened up, well, the thing ended up taking off like a missile. It ended up taking off, I mean, I'd say actually a couple of minutes after 9:30. This did have its pullback, so to say, right at the bell. It did, sharply drop to where I think it held support 245 and 250. And then from there, the next bar, the next minute, thing took off. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to show book map right now. I'll look to show what the heat map from level 4, so to say, looked like going into the market open, going into 9:30. So as I do that, let me just ask all of our students here in our trading room this. What was your first entry on this Watt trade after the market opened up? When the market opened up at 9:30, guys, not pre-market. I know we have a bunch of people that trade pre-market, but after 9:30, what was your first entry on this trade? If you guys recall. See a few of us typing already here in the chat board. As you guys answer, I'm just going to show this here on the screen. So this is the level 4. This is book map. So you could see leading into 9:30, we had resistance. Well, we would assume for there to be resistance at 3, a whole number, like $3 would be a huge level to focus on. And I still would think of it as such. But going into 9:30, 280 appeared to have a lot more volume on the book. And as I zoom in, actually 279 in particular had a 32,000 share order on the ask, right? So what happens after 9:30? Well, you saw it on the trade station chart, but just to break it down that much quicker and better for you, we had our pullback. It broke through a couple of orders on the bid as support. It did bounce pretty nicely off the 250 price level. Again, 244, I think, was the very low point. So it looks like there was support and entry potentially off 250. But ideally, again, when this begins to break above resistance, that's when we should expect a bigger move to happen. When I say bigger move, I don't always mean clean move. I mean, literally, a big result is likely to come if we see a big resistance get filled. So, by following the trend, by following the volume getting filled from level 3 and, well, level 4 here, we call it, if we happen to see confirmation coming in over the resistance, well, it certainly leads me to think this stock could fly. But it doesn't always work out perfectly like that, right? So we still need to manage our trade, establish our risk. So, for a trade like Watt, shortly after the market opened up and we had the pullback, it ended up beginning to push up pretty nicely, ended up moving back above 260, broke above this order, this orangish yellow line at 270. So, you know what? Before even 280, there was a resistance to work off of. It was past support. So 270, it seems like could have been a very ideal breakout entry. As soon as it popped 270, as soon as it broke above resistance here, that's what led this to begin the move up. Give me a split sec, guys. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I may have just gotten kicked off Trade Station. That was odd. All right, looks like I'm good to go right now. That was weird. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. But nonetheless, you could see once it really broke above the first line of defense on the way up, that being 270, it quickly moved above 280. It quickly hit 290. And from there, it truly started to begin to build more and more support. And of course, really, once it broke above 3, once it broke above all of the orders that were on the ask, well, from that point, that's when we expect a very sharp move, if not from 270, 280-ish, then certainly from 3. So I know that there was a bunch of us that got in here off of 3, and quickly as it broke above the level, you could see this just funky pattern here on the book map. This indicates that the Watt trade got halted. So just to go back, as soon as this popped above 3, the market halted the stock based off of volatility. Notice the lapse of time here from 9:34 Eastern time to 9:39, right? Ken says that he got in at 9:39, I believe. It was roughly at $3.21. So Ken, did you get in after the stock reopened from the halt? Andreas says he got in 289. He ended up using a market order, which I'll be transparent. I would not recommend to use for a crazy move like this. It can get you filled at a bad price potentially. Ken says he doesn't recall. My assumption, Ken, would be yes, just based off the reopen 939, the pullback here. Looks like you had a decent price off the shake. Now, if you end up getting in after a stock reopens from a halt, I mean, of course, this stock ended up, popping a little later on here, but it pulled back. It ended up dropping off extensively from that point, right? So, for anyone that, let's say, wasn't in this trade off the 3 level or from 270-ish, like we were talking about, how do you react to a trade like this? Now, it's much easier to evaluate this after the fact and to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But, the more that we do this, the more we'll recognize certain tendencies and patterns, and it will lead us, not just as a team, but as an individual trader, for you to realize that pattern the next time a stock like Watt gets halted. So very similar, really, guys, to seeing a stock, open up 100+%. When a stock reopens from getting halted, there might be a bit of a gap up. There might be a bit of a pop or a gap up after, but more often than not, I'm personally expecting a pullback to see traders sell off. I mean, just that would be the first instinct, I believe. Let's say, just this is a very silly reference, but it's the way that I put it. For the uneducated mass, meaning for a lot of traders out there that don't really know why the stock is moving the way it is and doesn't really have a good, idea of where the stock will move to. If you're uncertain about, making money or losing a big chunk of the profit, I think the wise idea would be to sell and to take the profit and run. So I think the uneducated masses and just anyone that's in this trade that's up big would look to just sell off. That's the natural reaction. So, that's what I like to think, at least, meaning that I'm not going to sell right away. But if I happen to see this stock reopen up and it pops up and it pulls back and, we don't really have a clear support to work with, well, it might allow the stock a bigger ability to drop off that much sharper. So when this reopened up, this watt trade at 9:39, we had this big transaction on time and sales at $3.35. We didn't really have like a concise resistance to work with. There wasn't really like an orange line, so to say, above the price action here. So there wasn't really like a breakout level to consider after it reopened. If anything, we had support. Support on the bid right here was off of 330. We had a 58,000 share order on the bid. Okay, well, that's pretty strong. I'd like to think if we continue to see resistance break and for more orders on the ask to get filled, then this stock should continue to move up. What if it doesn't do that though, guys? Just like we went over in class, just like we covered in the phase 1 class from last week for those that attended. What happens if the foot's taken off the gas pedal for a stock? What's the line? What's the line that I like to say? The difference between a stock and a car. If we're in drive and we take our foot off the gas pedal for a car, I mean it stops, right? It slowly stops, and that's it. If the foot's taken off the gas pedal for a stock, guys, what happens? I mean, don't get me wrong, it slows down. It definitely slows down. But Chuck, there we go, and Ken and Wendy too. It slams into reverse, right? That's the silly line I like to say. When you're driving a car, obviously you control the manual, whether it drive, park, reverse, etc. With a stock, if we tend to see the momentum drop off and we tend to see the foot taken off the gas pedal, so to say, that's where we could expect to see a very sharp drop off afterwards. I mean, just within 1 minute, within probably less than that, this stock ended up dropping 15 to 20 cents off the break of support. So it didn't just slow down, it broke below support, it held underneath it for quite a bit. And then over time, it did continue to push up a bit. So there is potential to re enter this trade after it got halted. But it's not to say to just try and buy off the bid and to catch the falling knife, so to say, on the way down. Fortunately, this only dropped 15 to 20 cents. And fortunately, it only was down for about a minute or so, if that. But for a stock like Watt that made such an extensive run up, if the smart money is continuing to sell off and even to short, well, you don't necessarily know of that beforehand, right? We don't have that great foresight. So, that's why I personally like to buy a stock after it breaks through a level as it's moving up. Now, we tend to go through that in Traders Talk in this workshop week over week. But I want you to realize what I'm saying here. I'm not buying this stock off the reopen right off the bid over a level. That's the concept, but this stock is falling at that time. It's not moving on the way up, right? Notice what happened when this broke through this level on the way up just a minute later. Very clean move, right? Very stressless trade, so to say. So those ideally are going to be my best type of entries, to see a stock break through a level as it's popping, as it's pushing up. All right, so it looks like there was a little slippage off the reopen from the halt, but it ended up moving back up, moved up for about like 50 cents almost. Now, over time, though, it ended up coming back down. It ended up beginning to hold underneath 350 and 347 or so here from where it got halted. And over time, it dropped. So again, just another point that I like to express, and not just in traders talk, but we talk about this every day otherwise in the room. You know, day trading is not necessarily scalping in the sense of going in and out within a minute's time. But day trading isn't just as well buying a stock, holding it throughout the entire day, and then just selling it later on, hopefully at a higher price, right? Given the volatility, this stock made such a big move up, it ended up pulling back quite a bit after, right? Ended up bouncing all the way off from 280, and then from there started to move back up. So, just as much as I like to express that we don't tend to just scalp in this trading room, that is one type of day trading. We don't tend to hold all throughout the market day and just sell at the afternoon. So, very thankfully, Watt ended up, pushing back up. It moved, below and back above this purple line, the VWAP. And then over time, you could see it started to begin to break above new resistance at 320. It popped above this orange line at 320. Started to move up to the next resistance. And then it pulled back. And then over time, guys, over time, of course, we just saw this together in the trading room here. This ended up just ripping through all of these orders on the ask. So, should we happen to see a stock like Watt continue to break through resistance and major resistance here, like we were saying at 345, 350 at this point, very similar to what we were looking at off the halt and from the market open at 3, if it breaks above all of these orders, it leads me to believe, again, a big move is coming. Now, with this popping through all of these orders and moving up, I'm thinking it's going to move up and make a big move upward, right? Again, notice how I'm starting this off. When a stock breaks through major resistance and major volume-based levels, a big move is to be expected. Up or down. I'm hoping by following the trend and seeing these orders break, I'm going to be in the right. I'm going to see the stock take off. And of course it did. But that's not to say it can't be a false breakout. And it's not to say for this stock to make a pop over 350 and then for it to utterly tank right after to the VWAP line again. Let me ask you guys here in the trading room, do we tend to see that happen on a frequent basis? Do we tend to see these false breakouts happen frequently? Chuck says yes. Lance Michael saying yes. Ken clarifying, saying more on the small cap stocks, much like this Watt trade, right? We tend to see the volume traded drop off very sharply. John says maybe 80% of the time. Cliff says too many times, he says. So, what I'm pointing to again is that we need to still establish risk, meaning we have to think, well, what happens if this goes the other way? How long am I trying to hold on for, and for how much? So, if we look at this Watt trade, just seeing this kind of approach the 350 resistance, and, we could say there was an order here at 360 as well. If we see this break above resistance perfectly, and, much like I also like to say, if smart money is not in the business of making small money, then I'm led to think there is a good chance this could move up towards the next major resistance ahead at $4. All right, so from one major level to another, if we have an ability, guys, to pick up even, let's say, just like 30 cents on this trade, if we buy over 350 and even if we just sell it like 385, 390-ish, we can't be a perfectionist and we can't expect the perfect move. It's fantastic when it works out that way, but I always like to undercut my expectations or the move in general, meaning that I have no problem leaving money on the table if I'm able to cleanly take a profit. Ken says 30 cents, nothing to sneeze at there. Well, looking from level to level, Ken, it's not guaranteed, but I'd like to think if this breaks 350 and if smart money is not in the business of making small money, then I'm thinking a 30-cent profit could be pretty realistic. All right, so even just thinking about a 30-cent profit, or even let's just go higher, like 35 cents, God forbid, based off of that potential profit target and based off the next level ahead, guys, ideally, how much would I look to risk if I were to buy over 350 here? We tend to cover this in the phase two class. In fact, last month in March, we covered this phase two, lesson three in particular, a class titled Setting Stops and Taking Profits. So if I have an opportunity to make like 30, 35 cents on this trade, ideally, how much should I look to risk at most? At most, guys, no more than half of that, right? Roughly 15 cents or so from Anthony and Lance. So as soon as I jump into this trade, if we take this trade and jump in over 350, you better believe that I'm going to at least think and plan ahead in case if this is a false breakout. So, a smart idea would be to place your stop limit order underneath you, perhaps at 340, perhaps underneath this orange line, so to say. It's 10 cents. It's not 15, right? So, it's in line with what we see as our next potential, as our next resistance ahead. And this was a smaller resistance that was under 350. So, perhaps a strong resistance can become a strong support, meaning that if this makes a pop up and pulls back, maybe it holds 350 perfectly. Maybe it shakes and holds 345, this orange line. Maybe it shakes a little bit further and holds 340. Again, these darker orange lines here represent volume that was on the ask. So if those orders get filled and the stock makes a very big move off those price levels, I'm led to believe that the stock could hold at that price as support potentially, at least the first time. When a stock breaks above a major resistance, I'd like to think the first pullback is the best pullback. So let me bring up a story that just happened. This happened in a coaching session I was in with one of our students. So, looking at this Watt trade, I believe that we looked at this just a tad late, myself and one of our students, Julia. Now, it was called out at the time. I was just talking to her about a couple of trades that we were looking at from the open. And, it was right at 10:41. Ben called it out. Ben wrote in the chat room, just said, Watt worth watching. Amy, right underneath Ben, said, Watt running. And then Ben posted a 52-cent profit. Ben got in from 342. And this is essentially a scalp. He just took the money and ran off the profit or off the resistance at 4. But nonetheless, at 10:41 Eastern time, two of our students called it out. So if you guys could kind of think, I'm focused on another trade. I'm just looking at from the corner of my eye. I see two call outs in a row on Watt. I know it's a very active stock, so I'm thinking, well, there's a reason why Amy and Ben are both calling it out at the same time, right? So we turn over to it. It's already popping over 350 and it's already at like 375 or so. So myself and Julia, we were not going to chase the stock. We were not going to just jump in recklessly at 380 or so forth. I guess we could have made some money, but at the same time, we could have taken a bad entry and the stock, shook back down, of course, just like it did here. Well, long story short, guys, no pun intended. Look what ended up holding as support. Well, if you look at that, we end up seeing 350. I think it's on the nose. If not at 350, then I think it was at like 352, $3.52. It ended up poking its head off the bid at 352 and then moved right back up. All right. So I know that Julia ended up holding on to this afterwards. We ended up closing her out on this trade right off the resistance at 4. I think it was off the pop and drop. So started to pull back and then she closed and took her profit. So fantastic exit from Julia as we were working together. And, the entry played out perfect, right? But, once we got in this trade, and when once we ended up kind of seeing the stock begin to pull back a bit here and then push back up, we saw this order on the bid, the 60,000 share iceberg order. And again, I'm showing it from Bookmap, level 4, as we like to nickname it. you would see this on the bid. It would have been as it was on the bid side in blue. So you could picture that order being there. And, myself and Julia, we were saying together, if this stock were to break under that iceberg order and under that, buyer, then there's a very good chance that the stock could tank and begin to drop off drastically the other way. So, we were a little afraid of that, but thankfully, the end result is that support held. That 360 level, I don't even think got hit at the time, and it pulled right back up. Now, what happened though, of course, afterwards, we know what happens. Stock fell back down. It actually broke under 360, and later on, you could see here, big drop afterwards. This is what we were afraid of after this run up. Now, I wanted to go to right here. My belief is that we had a couple of traders get sucked into this false breakout at 4. Ken, you have a question? No problem. So, guys, as I'm going, keep in mind, we have a lot of questions to get through from email and then from private chat as well. But if you have a question pertaining to bookmap, or more so pertaining to this Watt trade, I would say, let me know here in the chat board, certainly. I don't think anyone would admit that they got caught in this false breakout here. I say that because the end result, it was a very sharp drop off. I don't know if anyone would want to mention that they got sucked into this big shake. I don't need to know names. My belief is that somebody got sucked into this trade because it's a great setup. Again, big volume based levels have big results from them once they get filled. So, following the same strategy, this stock was continuing to go up and up and up and up and up and up, and it ripped right through all of these orders, including this big 55 plus thousand share at 4. So for anyone that was looking for continuation and a pop higher, well, you looked at the right place. You really did. 4 was the right level to watch. Now, clearly, it wasn't the right time. So, this ended up popping over 4. It ran up almost 20 cents from there, but it started to pull back and it broke below 4. You could see it ended up, supporting itself from 392, 395, just the orders and the volume that was filled before 4. That's like what I was saying before at 350 and so forth. But if this doesn't break higher and more so, holds support at 4 and then over time, get back towards the last peak, if it doesn't continue to move higher, guys, we know what's coming. And we also have to now think about time of day too. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, just about. Typically at 10:30, 10:45-ish Eastern time, we tend to see, pullbacks. We tend to see the momentum drop off for a lot of the trends that we were following from the morning. And at the same time, again, a simple case of if it's not breaking higher, there is only one other way the stock is to go. And when I say higher, I don't mean higher over this peak. I mean off the breakout here, just like I showed on Bookmap, we had our pullback, and then right over here, where it failed to move back above 4, we got to see this thing get back above 4. We got to see this thing move back closer towards the last peak. Again, if it doesn't do that, we have to think about timing of the day. We have to think about the fact this stock is already up, 250+%. So when do traders really begin to sell and take profits? We've seen pullbacks and retracements, but we can't keep expecting the stock to go up and up and up and up all throughout the morning. All right, question from Ken here first, then Chuck. I just saw from Ken, question: with a 60,000 share order on the bid acting as support, would you give the breakdown a little more leeway than a less prominent support, being such a big 60,000 share? So I'm a little thrown off just by the verbiage there, Ken. Let me know if I'm getting this right, Ken. You're asking, would I give the breakdown a little bit more time? Meaning, let's say, hypothetically, not hypothetically, my assumption is that Ken was looking for a short. Let's say Ken was looking for a short. I think he's asking, would I wait to see more confirmation of support being broken before I jump in short? Ken saying no. Uh-oh. Ken's question again was with a 60,000 share order on the bid, and again, that was at 360. Would you give the breakdown a little more leeway than a less prominent support? So maybe I'll flip that around, Ken, and let me know. Would I look to buy off the bid at 360 or under that, being such a big iceberg and perhaps expecting it to move back up at that point? I see Ken typing here. Just give him a quick sec. And then I want to get to Chuck's question just right after. I think Ken stopped typing. I don't know. All right, so here I'll get to your question. I'll try and go back to Ken just after. Chuck's asking, Josh, I've learned to look for some sellers above a strong level rather than none at all. When none at all, I become very leery of continuation. So just to repeat what Chuck said there, Chuck is pointing out that he's learned over time that he needs to look for some sellers above a strong level. Now, that's the correct observation, Chuck, and I'm happy that you're bringing this up, not just to everybody. Of course, I'm happy that you realize that yourself. Why do we need sellers above resistance, guys? I mean, don't get me wrong, as if a stock breaks above a huge resistance and there's no orders on the ask above that price, no, larger orders, it gives the stock a greater ability to fly. Like APA yesterday broke above resistance early and it was a straight shot. I mean, this was just an effortless run almost. Just swift. There wasn't really much volume on the ask once it broke above resistance. So, in a perfect world, without there being any sellers above resistance, I'm led to think that it could fly, but it doesn't always do that. And then, of course, we would like to see some sort of volume on the ask above a resistance because we need to see confirmation. And specifically, I'm referring to the time and sales. So, I'm sure we could use just any trade to go over and go through that. In fact, we'll go right back to Watt. And you know what? Let me get back to Ken's question there. I saw Ken just repost Chuck. And then we'll go through essentially what happened when this ended up breaking above resistance at 4. We'll look at the breakout over 4 at least here. All right, let's see. From Ken, just going back to him, he says, I'm saying being long on a trade. Going back to Ken's question. Being long, if on normal times you'd get out if it broke support, you'd exit. But with such a large iceberg order, 60,000 shares at 360, would you not exit so fast because of the support being broken? I'd still get out, Ken. I'd still get out there. So again, what Ken, I believe, is asking is that if, let's say I'm long already on this trade, and at the time, I think it was right over here is where we saw the order, like right where my cursor is. So Ken's asking if we see such a big iceberg order on the bid at 360, and that order gets filled, would I stay in a little bit longer to give it some leeway, given the size of the order, 60,000 shares here, or would I rather just get out right away? So time of day is very important, Ken. That does lead to, the difference in my answer. So if I happen to see Watt already run up like it did and it breaks, a very big support, it leads me to think that supports, to become resistance after. So that is where I would say yes. More often than not, at a time like this, yes. Now, let's say if this was from earlier in the morning, let's say even before the halt here, let's say, for instance, we ended up seeing, I don't know, let's say we had a pop over 3 here. You know what? Let's say we had it right here, Ken. Just hypothetically, I'm giving a complete made-up example, right? But it's good to know this because, this does happen at times, much like from earlier. But here during the market open, the first 30 minutes. Let's say if we had a breakout over 3, Ken, and you know what? We end up seeing an iceberg order 60,000 shares at 290, at $2.90. If we end up, well, you know what? How about this, Ken? You know what? We're not going to make up an example. Let's just say at 3 support broke. It's the same thing as trying to like buy off the bid, and it's the same thing as just trying to hold on to a trade, much like you're asking. So if we see big support break, and if I didn't get out ahead of time here, if I got greedy and I missed out on a huge opportunity to make money, and if it dropped all the way back down, and if I'm still in, if it breaks under that support, very good chance I'm going to get out. Now, that's not to say I'm going to move on to a different stock right away. That's for me to still watch this stock. And you know what? Hey, if it continues to tank, then I'm going to move on to another stock, especially if I can't short it. But of course, you could see over time on a stock, on a scenario like we have here on Watt, it broke below support at 3, big order on the bid. And then over time, 15 minutes later, it did squeeze up off the price and begin to move up higher, right? So, a couple of things. If you're not as likely to just watch this stock over the next 15 minutes, what could you do? What could you end up doing to make sure that you'll be there to try and capitalize on the move back up? What could you look to do? What are some options? I'd say there's 2 options I'm thinking of. One would appear to be a little bit more responsible than another. Lance says buy stop limit. That's one of the options. I'd say, to be fair, Lance, that's probably the less reliable option. Now it depends on when you place the stop limit order. The safer idea would just be to simply set an alert. Set an alert, like draw a horizontal line, set an alert at the price level at least. So if you move on to another stock, at least you'll get pinged and alerted once the stock touches the same level again. Why do I say to not as much use like a buy stop limit order to enter? Well, this did just break below support. So I'd like to think a strong support likely to become strong resistance at first. Well, it popped above 3, Lance. If you set a stop limit order above 3 right away, you would have been filled and you would have been on the way back down here again, right? So at a minimum, to avoid a potential false breakout, perhaps you just, at the least, use an alert. Jerry's asking, where do you do that? So, Jerry, just watch what I do here for TradeStation 9.5. I left click my chart once. Notice these rows of icons pop up. Like you don't see them pop up here. I left click my chart once. And you have all these, little buttons and so forth. I want a student to see that because they were asking me that privately on the side earlier. But Jerry, to go to the drawing option right here, this little tab that says drawing, horizontal line, just left click once and you snap it on the chart. Now you could hold the line and move up and down, like use your left cursor and hold up and down to get it to the price that you're looking to set it at. But for the alert itself, just right click, go to format, alerts right here. That's all. All right. So I was mentioning to Lance that it's a potential option to use a stop limit order, and if you used it the second time here, it would have worked out pretty nicely. But we always have to think, well, a strong resistance likely to become strong support likely to become strong resistance afterwards. So we have to think about second attempt breakouts and so forth, second attempt moves, so to say. For instance, and I know hindsight 2020, but after the first breakout and halt and so forth, look what happened. It held under 350 later on, and then after it popped 350, it held 350 as support, moved up to 4. Right? That's what we hope for, and that's what we typically expect to see. So I wouldn't necessarily use a buy stop limit instantly there for that reason, but at least set an alert at 3. You move on to another stock. whether it be, INO, whether it be any one, of the others that we called out from this morning, VXRT, I saw a chat on, but hey, if you end up getting a little pop-up, little ping or audio alert, just saying Watt at 3, testing horizontal line, you turn over to it right away. Now, that's not the end of it though, guys, right? We still need to look for confirmation on time and sales. We need to tape read and look for the green coming in on the tape. Of course, you could see on a trade like this, it ended up popping and dropping from 3 shortly after 10 o'clock. Ken, I see your next question, just that hypothetical. I'll get to that in just a second. Got a lot to get through here, guys. So you could see that at least when this went to retest 3 right here, look at all of the green at 3. So it shows that there was an order that was filled. And when it breaks above 3, well, we start to see some green coming in over the level and some yellow. So don't get me wrong, that's a good sign to begin, but that doesn't guarantee a stock to cleanly run up right at that exact moment, if not even at all. What happens if this holds 3 resistance again here perfectly, and we don't really tend to see more buying coming in off the ask? Well, then I'd expect the stock to tank after that point from there. So, seeing this test 3 and pop over 3 and seeing some green, it's a very good sign to start. So it would lead me to think, well, if it's not breaking any lower here and begins to move back up, if this breaks back over 3, again, maybe not right away, but a better run is to ensue at that point. So, it re-broke above resistance, and from there, like I said, just very clean move. All right. So, oh, no problem, Ken. You were just commenting on that question. No problem. I thought you had another hypothetical. Yeah, no problem, Ken. All right. I got a lot of catching up to do on the chat board, and not only that, through email too. So let me just do that. Give me like 10 seconds. Let's see. All right. Here's one from Aravinda, one of our students here in the chat board. If I am in a trade in pre-market and I hold the position going into the basically Aravind is asking if I'm in a trade in the pre-market, can I hold going into the market open, or should I close trades prior to the market open? Aravinda, better to be safe than sorry. Last thing that you would want to have happen is be up 30 cents on a trade, or even just have your day's pay and you're expecting a big move, big pop right away at the open, and it tanks. So, after 9:30, did Watt break out? 100% it did. But, we could look to get back in on this trade if we sell in pre-market. We could look to set up an order to buy if this breaks above resistance and, attempt to, get right back in the trade from where we left off. So, I have, and I bring this up because I have a student, not to be named. They're a student in this room that's really beginning to post some good profits. They've been with us probably as long, if not longer, than I've been employed, to be very transparent. But this is a trader that always tends to ask me the same question. They tend to ask me the question of, I got out too early. What could I have looked at to stay in the trade? Now, this question doesn't get asked to me by this same student every single week, but I see that this student does tend to ask this question when they tend to ask me a question in Trader's Talk. It's the same question over and over. So I have to tell them, much like I'm telling you, Aravinda, and anyone else here in this room, the market's going nowhere, guys. We can get back in on the trade. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. What happens by any measure if this, doesn't really begin to break out? If we tend to see traders look to sell off and short a lot more than it did, if it doesn't pull back to 250 and rather just slams below it, man, this could be a total dump off. So, it's great that this was a fantastic pop after 9:30, and it was great that it continued after. But again, just to go even to an example like NBY, this stock did pop, I think, like right at 9:30 yesterday at the open. But if you're not quick enough to get out, then there is a very good chance you end up getting filled lower than you would have from pre-market, and if not much lower, if you tend to hold on hoping for a new move up. Right? And this trade just continued to slump off all day. So And until you're consistently making, your day's pay or well more than your goal. Jerry took the words right from my mouth there. Don't get greedy, right? And then, of course, just going back, Ken saying, wait to get some experience, Aravinda, before you hold into the open. Chuck says, take the profits. Seems the prudent decision if you have doubt. That's exactly it, Chuck. I mean, I like to phrase things very bluntly at times, or just very, very basic, elementary, just to hammer the point home. If I was in the interest of gambling, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys. I would be with buddies going to Las Vegas if the strip was open. If the casinos were open, I would be going there, right? If I wanted to gamble. I'm not here to gamble. I'm not here to just shred up money. I'm not here to take uncertain positions. Now, here's the thing. Our trading, anyone's trading, is not guaranteed, right? My win-loss percentage is nowhere close to 100, and I'm not perfect. But I have to risk my hard-earned money, as I like to phrase it, into a position that gives me as much certainty as possible. So if you have doubt, much like Chuck wrote, why risk it? And what happens if it goes the complete other way? You look very foolish, don't you? So, again, I'm not here to gamble, guys. I'm not here to force a call out. Like, for instance, at this time, typically, you don't see too many call outs from me. I let the chat go in the trading room. You see Ben blast profits over and over. Guys, that's great, but there's a reason I'm not chatting. There's a reason I'm not making posts and call outs. Because there's not as much opportunity on some of those trades. And, even if I tend to see a stock that's actively moving, it might be untradeable for a lot of us here. And even aside from that, even if it is tradable to a degree, we simply know at this time of the day, there's not as much out there to take advantage of. So why am I going to force anything in the chat board for you guys to risk? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that for myself, and I'm not going to do that for you guys. And I don't want you guys to do that for yourselves either. All right. Let's see. Let's see. From Daniel here in the chat board. I wasn't going to skip over this. Daniel was just asking, is there a way to buy stocks before the pre-market open? So I think, Daniel, if you're referring to just before 9:30, so before 9:30, you could look to trade pre-market. What you need to do is just make sure that your duration is set to day plus or GTC plus. Day plus or GTC plus gives you the ability to trade before 9:30. Now, not every broker opens up exactly at the same time for pre-market. So, you could see that, most brokers open up at 8 a.m. Eastern, TradeStation being one of them. I can't trade on TradeStation before 8 a.m., Daniel. Simple as that. They won't allow you to. Interactive Brokers ends up allowing traders to begin trading as early as 4 a.m. Eastern time. All right. John's pointing out here in the chat board, although it wasn't a technical trade that John was like jumping into, he closed out a trade. So John actually said before 8 a.m. Eastern time, John called TradeStation to get him out of a big overnight winner. So their trade desk opens up at 7:30 there, and that's what John's saying. So I appreciate that post, John. Thank you. And it goes to show, at least, although you can't trade and enter a position before 8 a.m., at least they could potentially look to get you out. There might be some fee, John, if you call in to get the trade closed. And if you didn't get charged the fee, they probably did that complimentary. I think it's like a $45 or $50 fee. All right. Let's see. I got a lot here in the chat board. John says they waived it. Yes, good point. So it is significant. So they are nice. The first time they'll likely say, "All right, you know what? First time, we'll waive it. Just don't let it happen again." So at least they did that. That's nice of them, John. So let's see here from Steven in the chat board here. What do you do if you get caught in the market halt on Watt. Let's go over that because we didn't really address that as much, right? We were talking about the entries. We were talking about what happens if you get caught in a false breakout like 4 here, but we didn't really talk about what happens when you get stuck in the halt. So let me ask, just was there anyone here that was stuck in the halt right off of 9:34 Eastern time? If you were stuck in the halt, I mean, you were up on the trade. If you were in the halt, you were either break even, meaning that you got in right up or right off the highs, or you were up. Now, when the stock reopens, we have to expect sell off, Stephen. So we were addressing that a bit earlier. We were saying that, let's say if you weren't in this trade just yet and you were looking to get in, well, when it reopens up, you have to think about where support is. But more so, you have to wait to see if the stock ends up breaking above big volume based resistance from there. So over time, it wiggled up, it came back down and really failed to break higher. So I was more discussing the entry after the halt. Let's say if you were in the halt, well, again, very similar to what I mentioned before, I would expect to see sell off when it reopens, to see the dumb money, so to say, just instantly sell off. When a stock reopens from a halt doesn't mean it's the end of the run. We see stocks just continue over time. But when it reopens, the dumb money is there to sell, just to instantly sell off. So it popped up at first. If you don't look to get out right away just to take the money, then certainly by the time this comes screaming back down and breaking under a big level, from that point, I would certainly say to close out. Let's try and see if I could look at Watt from Bookmap here. There we go. So again, what was that support level? I think it was at 330. Yeah, 330 right here. That was the big iceberg when it reopened up. So when it reopened, if you were in the position, just like I said, just if you're expecting sell off, you look to get out. Notice what happens here. Even I didn't notice this until right now, but on Bookmap, you could see that there was a larger order on the bid. It got filled at 350. You see this orange line here? So really, this stock ended up dropping off a lot faster as soon as that order on the bid broke. Not even 330. That's the iceberg literally after the reopen. That's your big support. But when this ended up breaking underneath the iceberg, the order here that was on the bid at 350, that's when it started to drop off a lot faster. Donald, excellent exit there. Donald was in, I think, from 289. He was stuck in the halt, but he ended up closing out, got out at 350. Donald, very nice. Donald, what I tell you would happen there, right? I mean, we were chatting about this on the side in private chat, and you mentioned to me, you said I'm in Watt while it's halted. What do you do now? The basic answer is wait until it reopens, right? I felt bad telling that to Donald, but there's nothing else that we can do. Literally, there's nothing else that we can do to change the position that we're in until it reopens. But we have to look for support, look for resistance, and think about overall, trader psychology. For a stock that's up as much as Watt was, you got to expect a pullback. You got to expect, sell off. Well, it started to move up again. What happens normally after that point? Big sell off. So, Donald ended up closing out cleanly there off of 350. Ken says pray. Yeah, I guess that is the other thing that you can do, Ken, right? Hope and hold, or just, I guess, like, of course, pray would be a good option too. All right, there's a bunch of stuff here, guys, that I am skipping here on the chat board, and then, of course, through email as well. So we're going to go a little bit over the next, we're going to go a little bit over 12 o'clock Eastern time here, guys. We'll go for the next 10 minutes, but from there, we'll look to close out. All right, so let's see here. What I miss? Anything in the chat? Mark says also once you told me once it adds to the noise. It's so distracting for some, and he writes in parentheses, to make comments on hard to trade stocks, although some like a challenge. Yeah, so hey, if you can get the shares to short a stock that's hard to borrow, then it adds even more options to your wheelhouse. But with so many stocks to already follow, if you're more inclined to just look for stocks that are easy to borrow to short, or otherwise just look for stocks to buy, aside from that, that at least could, block some of the quote unquote noise, like you were bringing up. Kathleen says TD Ameritrade Thinkorswim has an order GTC good till close that sells during the night sometimes. Yes, so GTC means good till close, so you could use that in the extended hours there, Kathleen. All right, from Chuck in the chat board, then I got to go through email here. So Chuck is saying, Josh, I've noticed that you are often in a stock early in the day. Of course, I mean from 9:30 to 10 o'clock is prime time. So we like to wait the first 5 or so minutes, maybe even less than that. But typically after those first few minutes, that's where you tend to see the trends begin to settle and build. So Chuck says, particularly ones with trend, clear levels, historically defined, etc. While keeping an eye on it with stops set, you often occasionally let it run. Resumably, oscillate through the intermediate levels, a bunch of words I'm having tough time pronouncing. Chuck says, I think that is the artistry we all strive for. Oof, Chuck, I appreciate that. I took that as a positive. No, I know what you meant there. So, let's go into INO and we'll finish that up here at least, and we'll go through emails too. So, what Chuck is bringing up is the fact that I'm focused on trend. I'm focused on large volume based levels, like extremely clear to identify support and resistance. But I'm also, keeping my eye on my money, my risk, how much I would like to make on the trade based off of the next level, how much ideally I should look to risk. So there is some artistry to that, Chuck. You're right. If anything, it's just being process oriented, making sure that your process is well structured, step by step, etc. So, I know we'll go through this trade. I was looking to go through this with you guys here in Traders Talk. I misnamed Watt as INO starting this workshop off. So I was going to go into this position. So INO we've been following over the last 3 days. Just really quickly, guys. We ended up following this yesterday. Ran beautifully from 8 to 975, 980. The day before that, we had the big volume spikes, the big smart money prints at 795 and at $8. So, hey, this stock wasn't on the main C2 watch list, right? But we've been following this together as a team over the last 2 days at least. We were looking for a potential move higher on this trade. So, for a stock like INO, again, same rules apply. If a stock breaks above big resistance, I'm led to believe that it can make a fairly successful run up. All right, so this morning when the market opened up, the INO trade, you see this big dot, this red dot, bubble, ball, whatever you call it. This is a big transaction right at 9:30. The market open. The price 952, right? You guys see that there? Now, what I'll do is just go right back to the tape so you can see that just on time and sales. You don't need to necessarily have Bookmap to show that transaction. In fact, simply put, you don't. So, looking at 9:30 when the market opened up for this trade, you could see right here. It's a transaction in black, 331,000 share print filled directly at 952. So we go to, there we are right here. Looks like it was holding underneath resistance from the chart, mind you, very cleanly at 957, 958 ish. Well, the INO trade shortly after the open ended up breaking above those price levels, right? I'll go back to Bookmap in a bit, but 933, you can see it break through those orders. There we go. Perfect. All right. So Once this begins to truly break higher, you could begin to see the green getting filled on the time and sales at 959, 960. Now, it begins to make a very strong pop from that point, right? So, just a couple of things with this. Again, that's why it's so important for us to try our best to look for breakout entries, to see this stock crack above resistance, and for us to get in as soon as that hits. Time and sales will be our confirmation. So seeing these prints come in at 960 is already a good sign, but it quickly begins to pop. 967, it goes up towards 973, 978, etc., all the way up to the peak here at the time, 990, right? So, long story short, what happens? Well, strong resistance ended up becoming strong support. Perfect support right here. So, to go to Chuck and his comment, it wasn't a question, just an observation. I ended up holding on to this trade for a bit. Now, I still left a crap ton of money on the table. This ran all the way up to 1040, but I was led to believe that, based off of Thursday's trading last week, that we were expected to see this make a sharp run, and it did. And yesterday it continued, Monday. But today we're expecting continuation if we continue to see resistance getting filled and more volume coming in above that price. So I'll be fair. When this ended up pulling back towards support at 952, that's where I ended up jumping in on this position. I ended up taking this as a pullback entry. It was a bit later on, right here, 960. That was my entry price. It was actually before it even tested 952. So I was down 8 cents on the trade to start. I could have had a better entry point. I should have, etc. But held on, pushed up. Now at this point, I'm still thinking, man, it might make some lower highs off of 975, and if it doesn't pop soon enough, then it might pull back. And what if it breaks below 950 and 952? Then I'll tell you, it leads me to think the stock's going to tank. And look what happened, right? So, the I&O trade, actually, we were talking about that prior to the Traders Talk workshop beginning, guys, right? A student was asking, I&O is back, almost back to the opening price, 952. Now what? And unfortunately, well, I mean, I told him exactly what happened. I said, I'm not sure, to be very transparent, but, we got out of the trade a while ago. You might see 9 get retested as support. I tell you, it fell a lot faster, a lot more than just 9. So again, just a very clear example of if it's not breaking higher, there's only one other way it goes. So that's what I felt over here. I mean, still, I was a little nervous about losing my profit from 960 to 975. Yeah, that's a nice trade, 15 cents. But I just from experience and intuition, I was led to believe that there is a better chance that we would see I&O make a run up to 10. So thankfully, by the time this ended up breaking above resistance from 975, 980, started to move up faster. So that led me to think there's a better possibility of that. If this ended up kind of falling back down here after and really holding under 980 and 975, that's where I'd say, uh-oh, looks like we have a lower high being built. Then it might make a lower low. Well, that didn't necessarily happen. So, I stayed in. And from there, the pop up to 10, I closed out. What was this at? 1025 closed out at. So off the pop, the next bar I got out. I was expecting a false breakout here over 10. I was expecting a pop over 10, and based off of it just being such a major level for this to quickly pull back. So still left some money on the table there, but ended up just, taking the money and run from that point. Let's see. Question here. Bookmap, NASDAQ. Yeah, well, to clarify, Bonnie, Bookmap shows the NASDAQ ECN book. So the data from NASDAQ Book Viewer, you do see in Bookmap. All right. Guys, you have questions on Bookmap, just ask me. All right. Just ask me right away. Josh at c2trading.com. All right. I want to go through some emails. It's already 12:10. Sheesh. All right. Let's go through this before we finish up. Actually, really just I had 2 emails, and that was all. So let's see. Oh, really quick question. Also, just very quick, guys. If anyone here has TradeStation and are inquiring about the TradeStation Select program, TradeStation Select Zero Commission Trading, just email me. One of our students, Jeff, just did. I thought it was a question for Traders Talk, but ultimately, if you have questions about the TradeStation Select program, just email me. Jeff, I'll write you back as soon as we're done. But for anyone else, I should rather say too. You guys have questions about zero commission trading, just let me know through email. And then also, we actually, oh, I'm sorry, not for TradeStation 10. So Jeff had a question about the alerts. He emailed this to me in the middle of our Traders Talk here. He's asking for TradeStation 10, how do you put the alerts on? Should be the same thing. It should be the exact same thing, Jeff. If you have the line set already on your chart, there should be an option to format. If there isn't an option specifically here for like format horizontal line, maybe there's a tab or option for settings, and then maybe it will say format. That's that might be it. Jerry says it's the exact same thing. Okay, all right. So I guess in that case we're good. Sometimes TradeStation 10 has these little differences between them and 9.5, like an extra click, if that. So Jerry's saying it's the exact same protocol. Good. All right, last question here. This is from Judy, and I was supposed to answer this last week. After her last coaching session, one-on-one, she emailed me about a question regarding the TradeStation platform and specifically reversing your trade. So notice, guys, very quick. It's not illuminated, but on my trade bar for level 2, notice you have a bunch of grayed out buttons here. Well, this one where my cursor is called reverse. So, is there anyone here that uses TradeStation that has used this button before to reverse? John and Ken both say never. John emphatically in capital letters there. Chuck says a few times. Yeah, I don't use it too often at all. I don't use it too often at all. So first, what is the reverse button? I mean, literally, it reverses the position that you're in. So if I'm long on a position and I click reverse, it's going to take me out of my long position and instantly fill me on a short. Reverse. Now, you can't use the reverse button as much, of course, if you can't short the stock. You can't literally reverse if that's the case. If you don't have the shares to short a stock, you can't use it. So that's first. Secondly, it gets you filled at market, right? Just like John wrote in the chat board. It's a market order. It's okay for an exit, but not for a re-entry. So, that's exactly why, John, I say I really don't use it too often. I moved my cursor, Mike. That was a couple minutes back. So yeah, right here. I'll keep my cursor on here as much as I can. The reverse button right here. It's underneath the buy button. It's not illuminated right now, but right, you should see it. Let me know. So, with the reverse button, it gets you filled at market. So, it's for that reason as to why I really don't tend to use it that much. All right. Bonnie says there are 15 choices for reverse. I don't know where you're looking, Bonnie. My TradeStation level 2. If you're looking at my screen here, guys, there's a couple of buttons that are grayed out, but there's just one reverse. All right. For anyone here, whether it's Bonnie or Jeff, I have a couple of questions on this. Guys, we cover this in class, and I'd just like to address it here. If you do not have my templates for either version, TradeStation 9.5 or TradeStation 10, don't pull your hair out trying to rebuild it. You're going to waste hours upon hours upon hours of time. We mentioned this in class. Just email me, and I'll send you over everything that you would need. All right, so getting to reverse, and that will do it for Traders Talk. So again, I don't use reverse too often for the reason that depending on the volatility of a stock, man, you can get filled at a bad price. For instance, what if I'm, short right now on this INO trade? And hypothetically, this really begins to start popping. Well, if I click reverse, not only do I close my position out at market, but I get filled on the long at market. So, with that, you could see that, getting filled at market as this is popping can get you in at a bad price. So it's not always an intelligent, option to use. So let me ask you guys then, if that's the case, when would be the right time to use the reverse button? When do you think would be a more ideal time or opportunity to use the reverse button? John says when a halt ends. Well, if you could short it, right? Because keep in mind, reverse. I mean, you could just use the close button, right, to get yourself out at market. The close button is slightly different, right? So that's a good option if you're in a stock that is moving up very quickly, but it has a tight spread. Gives you a better ability to try and get out at a better price. But aside from that, Jerry says to short. Well, let's be more specific though. So, I'm not just going to, hit the reverse button because I expect the stock to drop. It has to be under certain conditions. So, for instance, I'll clarify. This happened in pre-market, mind you, right? What I'm about to show you happened in pre-market. Or you know what? Actually, hell, we'll do this. This is after the open. This is just right now. So, with NCLH, we had big support at 11. I was watching this from pre-market. This was one of my setups I was looking at going into the open. NCLH off 11. Popped at the open. So, it slowed down. I mean, NCLH right now is more of like a level 2 stock, I'd say. Level 1, maybe level 2, meaning it's not too fast. The spread's pretty tight, very liquid order book. So if I use the reverse button on a crazy stock that, is flying up and down, I'm not going to get a good price. It gives me a lesser chance of getting a better price. So the type of stock I would like to use the reverse button on would be something that has more liquidity, would be something that we tend to see have a tighter spread. All right, NCLH. Let's just use this. All right, well, I'm not going to use the reverse button at any point in time. Let's say for instance, we're shorting NCLH. And you know what? It broke below 11. It could have been a nice pickup for about, almost 20 cents. But a classic case of if it's not breaking lower, there's only one other way it goes. Let's say if we shorted below 11, we got greedy. We held on, and we didn't really make any sort of profit. It's moving back up here. Well, I'm not going to just hold on to this short trade as this is just breaking above 11. It already held 11 a couple of times here. So if this does break 11, I would expect more momentum to see this run back up. So in a situation like this, where it doesn't really happen too often, but if we tend to see a slower stock that provides an opportunity for us to make money, seeing this type of move here, where again, if I shorted and I was too greedy and I lost the ability to make profit, or if I ended up shorting here afterwards and it's just not pulling back lower, you know what? At this stage, this would be the type of trade to potentially hit the reverse button, to close yourself out on the short trade as it breaks above 11 and to fill yourself long. You're not going to get crushed on the spread. You're not going to get crushed on the lack of liquidity. Of course, in hindsight, this is a great example. So, it's possible that it, doesn't turn out this well right away. It might kind of shake around in a smaller range and then maybe over time move up. But nonetheless, this would be right here the perfect example to attempt that reverse button if needed. Whew. All right, guys. I got a lot of other emails to answer that are coming in actually over the last 5 minutes, but we're out of time. So if you guys have any questions that you did not have a chance to get answered, of course, I see from Bonnie and Neil, just questions already sent in. I'll write you guys back as soon as I'm done here. And for anyone else that has yet to send over any questions that would like to, at least any questions, any trades to cover, send it right over to my email address, josh@ctutrading.com. Oh, and alongside that, I appreciate Jeff's email that just came in regarding the templates. If you guys don't have the TradeStation templates, the workspaces, as we like to say, again, email me, guys. Please let me know, and that way I'll be able to get you set up on everything that you would need to. All right. Aside from that, again, I appreciate everybody joining us for this week, not just here in the cyber group room, but for this week as well across all social media, Facebook, YouTube alike. Again, we tend to conduct this workshop in our trading room every Tuesday morning. And again, just if you guys have any questions, certainly let us know here. All right. Perfect. So aside from that, guys, for all of us here in the trading room, at least, we'll look to rescan the market heading into lunchtime. Not as much out there. So again, you heard it from me before. Not going to make as many call outs, at least going into the late morning, early afternoon. So we'll look to see what's out there and work together as a team. Take care, guys.